Welcome back, everyone. Lindsay and Pete here for round four. I had to think about that for a second, Pete. I'm like, man, has it really been four times? Well, this is our fourth podcast
We've
together.
been doing this for a while.
We've been at it. Yes, Pete is your financial guy. I am your health, nutrition, and fitness girl. And we have pivoted our conversation for today.
Yeah.
Initially, we were going to continue with the common misconceptions, thanks to social media blasting us with tons of information, some true, some not so true. We really enjoyed that last podcast and we gave everyone some valuable information. At least we think we did. And we did get some good feedback. So we were going to continue with that theme. However, we've decided to discuss something that may be a little bit more relevant for people. And Pete, do you want to share how we came upon this new topic today and what this new mysterious topic is?
Well, it just sort of came from just organic conversation we were having, right? And everything that we've been hearing in headlines, wherever we've been getting our headlines from over the last few weeks. I know certainly in the financial space, the end of February, I mean, literally the last 4 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks has been an interesting time in the financial markets. Lots of really interesting conversations that we've been having with our clients at the firm, but it also sort of prompted us to talk a little bit about how it might impact your space. Maybe not so much from the fitness perspective, but certainly from the nutrition perspective, as far as what things cost at the store, how things might change, how do we make how do we make decisions about the quality of food to put on our tables when pricing is forever changing? What are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we just trying to fill an empty belly? Or are we trying to accomplish a particular physical objective with the foods that we're consuming? And so maybe to kick it off, we just jump into what are all these different stickers that we're seeing and all these different natural, organic. What does all this mean when we walk into the supermarket and we see all these labels on different foods?
Right. And this actually does tie in perfectly with a mistake that can cost you because I can't tell you how many times I've had a client or my parents, sometimes they'll buy things from the store and they'll be like, oh, I got this new healthy. Oh, this is the best. This was my favorite. My mom wanted to make healthy cookies for my grandpa for his birthday. And so she found an organic sugar and she thought that meant the cookies would be healthy. I was like, no. Yes, organic is good. I buy organic, but just because you have like an organic cookie doesn't make it healthy. I told her, I said, the health concern with the cookies is not whether it's organic or not. The concern with the cookie is that it has, if you have a couple cookies, depending on how they're made, it might have your entire day's worth of sugar in one sitting, which is not ideal. But yes, so the question becomes, which labels do we pay attention to and which labels should we just toss in the trash? I would say the first one that I just kind of chuckle at is all natural. That doesn't mean anything. All natural, there are no guidelines that specify what criteria this product must fit to have the label all natural. It's pretty much just a buzzword and to pull in, people that are trying to buy healthy, right? So all natural, discard that one. And I would say another thing that I see people fall prey to is if there's the label vegan, they automatically think it's healthy. And I love that vegans have more plant-based foods in their diet and more whole foods, more fruits, more vegetables. That's an amazing thing that vegans do. But if someone, oh, what did I hear someone say one time? Oh, this is one of my professors. He goes, "No, you're not a vegetarian, you're a pastatarian. Like you're not eating vegetables, you're eating pasta and like, these vegan baked goods." So I would say those are the two things that I just kind of get a good chuckle at sometimes. But do you find yourself, because you are someone, Pete, that is very health conscious, and I think you do a very good job of staying on top of your health. And so for someone like you that knows a thing or two about this, do you find yourself getting confused when it comes to these labels? And which ones have you steered towards and steered away from over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have heard before that the all natural label is meaningless. I think the more I have learned over the years, the more I will focus on that label that shows the nutrition facts, the ingredients. I think that's really where I'm focusing. And I'd like for you to expand on this if you can, but to talk a little bit more about like the open range and like especially around eggs, right? We've been hearing a lot about eggs recently, and they talk about open range and all these different things with the chickens that are laying the eggs and what it all means
Right.
for those of us in Houston. The rodeo's going on. They have a display of these eggs that are hatching, and people will talk to us about eggs hatching and whatnot. Uh, but what is really important when you're looking at buying poultry or meat, and what you should be looking for about how the animals are raised?
This is a great question. And two things I want to say before I answer fully your question. The first is I want to lay a foundation for why this is important because the health of the animal impacts the health of he
Of
or she who
course.
consumes the animal. And if the animal is raised in these terrible conditions and there's high stress, there are
Hmm.
stress hormones,
Hmm.
are perhaps toxins in their system. We ingest those. We then, have suboptimal, well, it's not like, okay, you eat one bad piece of meat, you have suboptimal health. I want to put this in perspective, but the summation of all these little decisions that we make, that's what determines our health. So if all of the little decisions we make on a daily basis can contribute towards health, we'll be a much healthier human being. And so the health of the animal really does impact the stress hormones that are going through the animal and the nutrients that are in that animal when we eat them. So with eggs, great example is, when you crack the egg open and you see the yolk, those gas station yolks, those are like you can barely see where the white part stops and where the yolk begins because the yolk is like white.
Yeah.
It's like the same color as the white part of the egg. But then you go and you buy those. Oh gosh, now they're like what, $12 for a dozen
At a
eggs.
farmer's market.
Well, actually, that is on my to-do list to find a farmer's market here. And I think I found one. I'm going to try to go tomorrow because I've been trying to find a farmer's market, Pete. And last time I went, I was all excited. I was like, oh, farmer's market. There was not one piece of fruit or vegetable sold at that farmer's market. And I was like, how dare you call yourself a farmer's market? They're selling like soaps and like crafts and cookies and things like that. I was like, okay, someone else's farmer's market. That's not what I was looking for. But so to answer your question though, yes, the nutrients in that egg or in the beef or the poultry, it really is dependent on the health of the animal and what that animal was eating. And it's not natural for these cows to be eating grains. It's natural for them to eat grasses and to graze on their natural foods that they would be eating if they weren't crammed into, these tight quarters. But going back to the egg, so that's the first thing is the health of the chicken impacts the health of the egg, impacts the health of us. The second thing is after I left my Zumba class today, I was talking with one of my friends there, and she was like, yeah, the eggs got so expensive at the store. I just bought my own chickens, and they're like my pets now. And now my chickens lay eggs for me, and I have fresh eggs all the time. I was like, now that's a great idea. So I thought that was a cool little funny thing. But what are we looking for when we're buying eggs at the store? Unfortunately, the ones that you're looking for are super expensive these days. So, but I'll tell you what the best is, and then you can make your own decision. So, cage free is also one of those things that's kind of a joke because cage free sounds great, but it really only means no battery cages, and the birds are still often crammed indoors in these really tight quarters, and they have the cortisol and the stress hormones, and they're not eating a great diet. What we really want is we want the chickens to be eating an organic feed because we don't want, some of those herbicides and pesticides on the food that they're eating to then make its way into the eggs and into our body. So we want organic eggs. And what we really want is pasture raised, not cage free. And what's the other label that I see sometimes? There's cage free. There's there's one more. Can
Yeah,
you
I'm trying. I no, I'm drawing a blank. I know what you mean, but I
free
can't
range,
think of
that's
it.
what it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
free
free
range.
range. So there's cage free, free range, and then pasture raised. So pasture raised is the best because there's more space per bird and they are eating more of their natural diet. And there are more omega-3s in those egg yolks. The yolk is the part that has the healthy fats and the omega-3s. The free range birds, uh, yes, they do have access to outdoors, but again, it's like some of these farmers are just trying to check a box like, okay, I'll coop all these chickens up in this little tiny space and I'll put this little dirt, opening with access to the sunlight, this like 1 by 1 foot, and there might be some specifications like it has to be at least 3 by 3, but it's not that big of a space. So pasture raised is basically guaranteeing that they have the most space to roam around freely. So that's with eggs. Is that along the lines of what you've heard, Pete? Or I don't
For
know
sure.
what kind of eggs do you buy, or will this conversation change the eggs that you buy, putting you on the spot?
It won't change. It won't change the type of eggs that I buy.
Okay.
But I think it is definitely an interesting conversation to have. What I will tell you is that when I do go by a farmer's market, and if I do see eggs for sale at a farmer's market, that's a splurge because there's nothing like eating those eggs. They literally taste like something completely different.
Really? Okay, now I'm gonna go to the farmer's market tomorrow.
Yeah.
I did find one that I think sells actual like fruits, veggies, and things like eggs. So I'm gonna try.
Hmm.
Okay, so you're saying they taste way better.
They taste way better. It
Okay.
tastes way better. So when you think about what we're hearing in the news these days, and where food is being sourced, I mean, obviously things like eggs and what some fruits and vegetables probably hopefully coming from a little closer to home, and especially if you're shopping at a farmer's market. But if you are a little more price conscious or you're going to your typical supermarket, there's a pretty good chance that stuff that you typically will buy to put in your refrigerator is coming from foreign countries. And to the extent that any of that gets impacted um, by price differences, by any kind of import rules that might apply. Don't want to use a bad word, but look, the word tariffs have been in the news a lot recently, right? So to the extent that that impacts different foods that you might be become accustomed to buying, what should we be thinking about from a vegetables perspective, or things like that, right? Because we hear about different vegetables coming from different parts of the world.
Right. Yeah. Well, when it comes to produce, I do encourage people to buy organic. I know it costs more. And this statement is coming after a lot of reading on what some of these herbicides and pesticides are doing, and also being mindful that people are often tight on money these days. I mean, the food costs a lot more. I do encourage buying organic. However, that doesn't mean I think that someone is screwed if they're not buying organic. Like, I don't think they're going to die if they're not buying organic, but there are certain foods where it would be wiser to buy organic than others. So if you Google clean 15 and dirty dozen, what that is doing is every year they go in and they assess the produce and they see which, fruits and vegetables have the highest contaminate or yeah, I'm going to say contamination with pesticides and herbicides, because we do have enough evidence right now to suggest that these are not optimal for our body. And the dosage makes the poison. Glyphosate is, I believe, one of the worst ones. There is some good research on glyphosate basically impacting the way our mitochondria function. The mitochondria are what produce ATP energy. And also, mitochondrial dysfunction is implicated in a host of chronic diseases, from cancer to cardiovascular disease. So, again, I'm not saying that if you buy conventional, non-organic, I'm not saying you're bound to get heart disease or cancer, but what I am saying is, could it increase your risk of these if you have certain genetic predispositions? Yes. And I do emphasize if you have certain genetic predispositions. Some people have genes that allow them to detoxify very well, and then some people don't. And the people that don't, those are the people that really want to pay attention. And unfortunately, it's not just organic produce. It's plastics, it's, toxins in our cosmetics. So it's not, the organic food might just be a piece of the puzzle. But the beautiful thing is if let's say you're like, okay, you know what? I'm not gonna I'm not gonna put this in my budget to buy organic. Okay, what can we do in that case? We can really wash our fruits and vegetables really well. And we can do things like eat more foods that help us detoxify. Because, a question I have is, let's say you're buying broccoli and it's not organic. Okay, yeah, there are some, herbicides, pesticides on that. But broccoli also is very rich in compounds that upregulate certain liver detoxification pathways. Our phase two liver detox pathway, well, sulfur-based foods are one of those compounds that help us to detoxify better. So could it be, and I don't think anyone fully knows the answer to this question, but could it be that getting non-organic broccoli still is a net positive for our detoxification capacity because it offers compounds that help us to detoxify? Perhaps.
Well,
So,
that's encouragement to eat more broccoli.
oh, absolutely. I mean, honestly, like a client of mine was like, "Oh, I heard that kiwis have these amazing health benefits." So I went to the store and loaded up on kiwis. But I told them, I was like, yeah, every fruit and vegetable has its own superpower. You might read it about kiwis today, you might read it about broccoli tomorrow, you're going to read about cauliflower the next day. Every fruit and vegetable has thousands of phytochemicals in there, and these are disease fighting compounds. It's incredible. Like, I am so passionate and blown away by how healing food can be. And so, as far as washing, let me finish that thought. So
Yeah.
what they found is if you like soak in water and add like a little bit of baking soda to that, that can wash it better than just water and just salt. And another thing is I do recommend that we get a good filter for our water. If maybe I'll put a link to the filter that I use. I have, no affiliation with this filter, but it's one that I really have come to grow fond of because I do think it filters out a lot of the bad stuff and it keeps the minerals in our water. It's a simple countertop unit, but don't just wash your fruits and vegetables in tap water. I mean, sometimes I might, but if I'm soaking, like if I'm buying and soaking the produce in a bowl with water and putting a little bit of baking soda in there, I'll do filtered water in that because the tap water is a lot of times filled with crap. So if you're not going to buy organic, if you're buying something in a shell, not that big of a deal, right? Like a banana, an avocado is like usually on the clean 15, not a huge deal if you're like, I don't want to spend on the organic avocados. I mean, this is, what I've concluded after reading the research. These are my educated opinions, you might say. But wash your food well. If it comes in a shell, less need for buying organic and increase your intake of things that help with detoxification. B vitamins, no, magnesium, not huge for detoxification, but I would say sulfur-based foods, B vitamins, vitamin C, and if you do, take supplements, you might consider like a liposomal glutathione, not to stay on indefinitely, but you might tailor that to your genetics if you're working with someone that can run a genetic test because some people based on their genes do need a little bit more help in the glutathione detoxification department. So that's what I would say. That's my long-winded answer for that. I don't know if that raised more questions in you. If it did, ask. Otherwise, I have a good financial question for
So
you.
hang on to the financial question real quick.
Okay.
So two things. First of all, for those who don't know, you are able to run those genetic tests. So if anyone listening is curious about what their tests might yield and what a custom, supplement plan might look like, they could talk to you about that, right?
Oh, for
But
sure.
you touched upon something a moment ago that I think it's worth expanding on. We were in one of our conversations, we were talking about plastics and the plastics in our organs and the studies that have been done on cadavers and the presence of plastics. And our conversation kind of went down the path of it's not that hard to see how we get there with what gets dumped in the water. And you know where I'm going. You want to pick up on that and talk about it a little bit?
Yeah. And okay, so let me preface this conversation with there are so many unknowns that I don't want to take too strong of a stance with this, but I will tell you with the information that I currently have, this is definitely something I'm taking more seriously. And I could see how this is a contributor to fatigue, cancers, autoimmune conditions, neurological diseases. I could see how this whole plastic conversation may be a contributor. But when I say contributor, I'm never saying the sole reason. I'm always
Right.
saying a percentage of the piece of the puzzle. And this might be 1% of the contribution. It might be 10, 15% of the contribution, whereas the other contributors are the more obvious ones that we should always be focused on first and foremost, which is poor sleep, a poor diet, like not enough vegetables, not enough fruits and vegetables in our diet. The things that are most like that have the most evidence to link to diseases or suboptimal functioning of the body and
Mm.
fatigue, always make sure that you're not focusing on these things at the expense of forgetting those things. So let me say that. But I'm just going to read a little snippet from an article here, I think like one sentence worth. This is an article examining, a PubMed article examining microplastics in human health and disease. And it says recent science has associated EDCs, and EDC stands for endocrine disrupting chemicals. So things like BPA, BPS, bisphenol A, bisphenol S, what are the other ones? Phthalates, PFAS, PFAs, these things that are known as forever chemicals. So it says recent science has associated these EDCs with various diseases and conditions, such as hormonal cancers, reproductive problems, including infertility, metabolic disorders, including diabetes, diabetes, I think is a term I've heard thrown out there before, but diabetes and obesity, asthma, neurodevelopmental conditions, learning disorders, autism spectrum disorders, etc. And so again, we're on like the cusp of this research. So there's so much we don't know. Like we don't know, okay, what we do know is when humans are dying today and when we're cutting open their organs after they've died and analyzing what the content of our organs, there is a considerable amount of microplastics in our organs, in our brain especially. It tends to have an affinity for the brain more than other organs. We don't really fully know the implications of that, but I mean, there was one like news article that got like all these major headlines that is like, there's a credit card worth of plastic in your brain. And they found from what I heard that that was a little bit of an overestimation. They believe that they overestimated the amount of plastic in the brain, but still there was a considerable amount of plastic in the brain of some of these people. And actually, not some of these people, everyone today has considerable amounts of plastics in our organs. We don't know the implications of that fully yet, but we do have enough research to where they've banned BPA in baby bottles now. They're starting to ban BPA in other countries. So I do think there's enough evidence to say, hey, let's try to avoid that when possible. But again, with misconceptions, just because you see a can that says BPA free, well, they might just be replacing the BPA with BPS or another chemical that's shown to have endocrine disrupting factors in it. So it can be like honestly my heart just kind of like sinks a little bit and it's like, well, what the heck can we do, right? Like it's like should we can we even like make a difference? But I do believe we can. And I think I'm gonna there's so much I could say about this, Pete, but I definitely want to get to your financial stuff. So I
Oh,
think I'm gonna write an article. Not I think I am. I'm gonna write an article with some of my thoughts on all of this and what we can do because I believe that every problem has a solution. The solution may be, maybe not like, oh, this solves everything, but I think there's always something that can be done to make it better. And I do have a lot of thoughts as to how we can not appall or what's the word I'm looking for, overturn our lives
hmm.
and still make a difference, a significant difference in the health of our body. And I've really gotten so passionate about just everything that I've decided, like, I want to show people what's possible. Like, I want to be the crazy one that does pay attention to all these things and see what can happen with my health. And I will say, like, over the last year, I've really dedicated it to eating tons of vegetables, tons of fruit, paying attention to my toxic exposure, like doing all the things. And I have felt a considerable difference in my health. And I do, share these things with my clients. And it really is incredible to see the power of food and these lifestyle changes. And, I've had the joy and the blessing of helping people to work with their doctors to come off medications and now experience an even better life than before when they were on the medications that were causing side effects, right? So it is really incredible to see. And I will
And
definitely go in that
I
direction.
think it comes from having the knowledge, right? And cross-checking your sources.
Mhm.
So if you have enough knowledge to have that foundation to be able to do this analysis on your own, then you just want to make sure that you're cross-checking your sources for the data that's leading to your opinion, and maybe even consult with a professional, right? Like even as much as I have learned over the years on this topic, I'll ask you whatever I don't know or just confirm because I know that you are the expert, right?
And there's always more to learn. So I
Hmm.
always tell my clients, everyone, if you ever hear something that's counter what I'm saying, please show me, especially, I
Excellent.
mean, mainly if it's a research article, but yeah, but even if it's another figure on social media talking, I still love seeing what other people are saying so I can go to the research and see if there's any validity. So
Change our opinions.
yeah, and I've done that before. Like, there's been a couple times where clients shared something with me. I'm like, oh, okay, that's, definitely a little bit different than what I thought. And yeah, I think there's something to that. So with all of, the more expensive food in the store, really impacting what people are deciding to spend on. I know people don't spend on organic because it is more expensive and they're not sure if it's worth it. And people aren't buying the organic pasture raised eggs because it's like $1 an egg. But at the same time, if you go out to eat, you are spending, people do spend that money elsewhere. But needless to say, I do get it. Not everyone feels like they're in a position to do that. And with money being of concern these days, I know the markets have been a little tumultuous. At least that's the sentiment that people have been feeling, Pete.
Hmm.
And it's been interesting because your firm has put out significantly more emails, whether it was a webinar or a podcast, just you've been providing your clients more information in this time to let people know, hey, it's okay. And I thought that it was really great that we were able to pivot our topic to talk a little bit more about that because that's something that people are a little bit more concerned about right now,
Sure.
whereas maybe they don't have to be quite as concerned after they hear from you a little bit. So do you want to kind of lay the groundwork and then go into share a little bit of your message to give people some hope during these unknown times?
Sure. I think whenever you don't understand something really well and you don't know why something is happening, it can naturally induce anxiety and fear. And when the markets, like about 5 weeks ago, when the markets really started to get super volatile and we saw some steep declines, if you don't understand the data that is behind it, that might be balancing that seesaw of the volatile markets, but pretty positive data, what's going on in the news headlines that could be causing it versus what's actually going on in the numbers.
Right.
I think it's really easy to get afraid. And so we decided just a couple of days in, we sent out an initial email message to our client base going over data. So we are a data-driven firm. Our investment philosophies, our investment strategies are based on data. We check emotion at the door and we look at the data when we're making our analyses. And that initial email message in mid-February was purely data-driven. The markets, our email message didn't calm the markets. It may have calmed our clients for a few days, but it certainly didn't calm the markets. And we decided the following week to hold a live webinar for our clients, same day. So in the morning, the chief investment officer and I had a conversation about hosting a webinar that afternoon. And those who couldn't attend it live, they got the link to the recording so that they could listen to it on their walk or their run, like we hope that
That's right.
our listeners are doing, right? And then we stayed in touch and sent out a follow-up email message, not this past week, but the previous week. Again, data driven, looking at the different sectors. And in about 2 weeks, we've got our first quarter economic and market update call for our clients. So we'll be communicating a lot about what we see in the numbers. And at the end of the day, it's all about what's in the numbers and how that pertains to their investment strategies. And it also ties back to their financial plan, right? So we talked about eating foods that are in line with your nutrient objectives. Are you trying to build muscle? Are you trying to lose fat? Well, it's the same with financial planning, right? If you're trying to achieve a financial goal that is later this year, next year, the year after, we're going to take a very different investment strategy than money that you're going to use in 10 or 20 or 30 years. If you're 35 years old and saving for retirement, we're going to have a very different investment strategy than if you're 77 years old in great health, going on walks, listening to our podcasts, and envisioning another 20, 25 years. We're going to have a different investment strategy, right? And so understanding what your plan is will also dictate your investment philosophy and strategy, and might also then give you a little bit more comfort going through volatile markets. But let's face it, no one likes to open up an account statement and see the value down. No one likes to log into their portal and see that their account value has gone down 5 or 10 or 20%, right? No one wants to do that.
Two thoughts. One, my grandpa once told me, he who laughs last laughs best. It's kind of an inside joke of the family, but I think it applies here because just because it might be down now, as long as you're laughing at the end and having a good time at the end, you're all good, right? It's there's the ups and the downs of the market. And then the other thing that really rung true that you said is a lot of people's decisions, whether they realize it or not, are emotionally based. And
100%.
in nutrition and health and fitness for sure, and then in finances as well.
Absolutely.
It's so helpful to have a coach both in nutrition and fitness and finances
Yeah.
can help to check those emotions because otherwise, I know for me, I know that that has definitely been true in the financial world. There were definitely decisions that I would have made if I didn't have the honor of having you help me. And then before I knew you, my brother would help me and guide me, and he does very well with this stuff. And so having people that know their stuff has been a game changer for me. And I think about clients of mine when they see the fluctuations in the scale, and then when I can tell them, no, look, the scale didn't go up a pound because you gained a pound of fat. It actually went up a pound because you had a hard leg workout yesterday and your body is retaining more water. So don't worry. And then they're like, oh, because those people when the emotions are high, they make bad decisions, right? And I know what they do in the health world is they go eat a cookie to try to make themselves feel better from seeing the number go up on the scale. And maybe in the financial world, I don't know, Pete, what do they do? Did they go on I don't know, do they pull money out, prematurely, or what do they
They
do?
might they might sell or
Mhm.
they might buy.
Mhm.
So here's a really good example of stuff that could have happened last week, right? So last week there could have been two really big mistakes that investors could have made.
Okay.
And again, it depends on a lot of factors, but let's just assume that they are long-term investors. They might be 401, this might be their 401k, and let's call it a 35-year-old who logs into their 401k, heavily invested in the S&P 500 index fund, and so they see that their value has gone down depending on exactly when they logged in. Let's just call it 20%, right? They're like, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to sell. The problem is, when are they going to get back in? When are they going to have the discipline to make the decision that, okay, I'm going to get back in? Now, they've made that 20% for the purposes of this illustration. We're going to say their account was down 20%. So now they've made that 20% loss real
Mhm.
because they sold.
Yeah, yeah.
So now that loss is real. There's no riding the wave.
Mhm.
They put a line in the sand and they sold.
Yeah.
When are they going to get back in?
Mhm.
The other thing that can happen is they might say, oh my gosh, the market's down 20%. We should buy this stock. This stock is down 30 or 40%. And there's a couple of stocks that are talked about in the markets these days that are way off, and people might see them as being real buying opportunities. But when you look at the data that's behind the value, has that stock reached bottom? Is there enough data that confirms that, all right, you know what, we've probably hit what's called in the market capitulation, right? The market has thrown in the towel, whether on the broader market, on a particular stock. Have we hit rock bottom? And so having someone to talk to about, is this the right time to buy or sell, depending on what you're trying to do. Now, look, if you're, I am confident that if we look back at 2025 in 2045, we will look at this period and say that was a great opportunity to get into the market. Now, are you getting into the broader market, the S&P 500? Are there particular sectors of the market that you're getting into? 20, 25 years from now, I am confident we're going to look back and say, hey, this was a great time to get into the market.
Right.
A year from now, are there mistakes that could still be getting made? Sure. And so it really depends on your time horizon, and it depends where you're investing,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's also an important thing to think about as far as the emotions that you're thinking. And just one more point on emotions. When you make investment decisions, you need to be thinking about your investment objective. Specifically, this came up a couple of times over the last few weeks. If there are industries that you don't support, if there are individuals you don't support, if there are geographies you don't support, and you want to restrict from your investment strategy, cool. But recognize that there might be profit-making opportunities that you're foregoing by limiting your investment exposure. So you need to have that really hard conversation with yourself about, is this the place for me to be taking my morals and just what I think is right, or is the purpose of this account to be making money so that down the road I have a level of financial security? And there's no professional that can answer that. You have to, well, maybe a shrink, but you have to answer that question for yourself.
That's how I feel about a vegan diet. It's like, okay, if morally you don't want to kill animals, that's fine. I support it. I actually rewrote my entire ebook to make a vegan version to support vegans. So I support it. I think there's a lot of what vegans do that's good. But understand there are compounds that you will not be getting in your diet. And sure, can we supplement to make up for some of them?
There
Yeah,
you go.
but there's still areas where it will never completely replace, but we can do a good enough job. If it can't
Yeah,
be right, it's just more difficult. So it's like, okay, if ethically and morally you don't want to invest there, just understand these are the consequences and these are the potential, setbacks. But if you still believe that you net more, as a whole by making that decision, then let's do it.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Now you had, can I say, three F's that you are going to share? Did you still want to share those with people, or do you feel like that's a separate topic at this point, or do you want to dive into them?
I think we can start the topic, and then I think once again we're gonna have like all of these part twos that we're gonna have to get
Yeah.
recorded. We're gonna have to pick up on last times, and then I think on this one. So there's three F's that I will talk about frequently with clients because I think that they are really important to get into the conversation, especially if someone who has traditionally been a DIYer. They go to ChatGPT, they go to Google, they think they've got this all figured out. When they start to entertain the idea of working with a financial professional, whether it's a CFP, whether it's an investment advisor, whatever it might be, they struggle. And the three F's are fees, fiduciary. What exactly does that mean? And then something that a lot of clients may have recently been getting, their form CRS, or client relationship summary. And the reason that I think these are really important is because if you understand why you're choosing to work with a financial professional in whatever capacity is going to work for you, and you understand how that relationship is going to work, where's the conflict of interest? How do they get paid? Are they truly acting in your best interest? you're in a better position to make a determination about the value add that they might bring to your financial picture. So, under the heading of fees, there are some fees that are disclosed, there's some fees that are not. Fees hinge on whether or not the firm that you're working with is a fiduciary. Are they a registered investment advisor where they do not accept any commissions whatsoever? They are paid exclusively on a fee-based uh, method where percentage of the assets that they manage for you, or is there revenue sharing that is coming from the investment strategies that they might talk to you about? I can tell you that when I moved firms from my last firm, that was one of the big considerations that I was making in the decision to leave, because my clients now know that when I'm making a recommendation to them or we're discussing alternative strategies, I am not motivated by one or the other than what I believe to be in their best interest. So I'm explaining to them the differences. We can decide which one really fits best for them. Naturally, they're asking for my opinion, but my opinion is not going to be based on the revenue that will be generated for our firm. And those relationships are documented, those conflicts of interest are documented in the client relationship summary. So for anyone listening to this podcast, and look for something from your financial institution that is called the client relationship summary. It's a couple of pages long. And if you have questions about it, speak to your advisor, have them discuss with you what different sections that are confusing to you might mean, and ask them flat out, are you a fiduciary?
Yeah.
Now, one of the confusing things, and this was confusing for my clients when I was at my last firm, as a certified financial planner, as a chartered financial consultant, I am legally compelled to be a fiduciary.
Okay.
But the firm I was working with was not. So there was that inherent conflict, right?
Right.
I could not execute on my obligation. And that was driving me away from the firm because I truly couldn't act up to my obligation to act as a fiduciary. And so that led to the leaving of that firm. And then understanding the fees, management fees, internal expenses on mutual funds, whether you are looking at your 401k plan, there are expenses on those funds. What are they? Right? They don't have to be disclosed on a statement, but they are in the prospectus. They are somewhere. Know what they are, just so that you can make an informed decision about the relative value. On your investment strategies with your advisor, understand the underlying costs of the share class. Are you paying an upfront sales commission? Is there revenue sharing on the expenses going back to the firm? Understand all of it. It's not that it's necessarily bad. It depends on your individual circumstance, but you need to know the facts so that you can make a determination about what's in your best interest.
Right, because just like we were saying with the food packaging, no product in their right mind is going to say, "Yeah, we're good, but we're not as good as that guy over there," right? So it is up to us to know the things to look for, right? So like I mentioned, look for organic, look for pasture raised, but like what you're saying is look to see if they are a fiduciary, look to see what the fees are. And the thing is, you said they're not always disclosed. And I'm going to actually ask you to repeat that so I can make sure I understand. You said like the fees are not always disclosed here, but they will be here. Do you mind repeating that one more time? Where might you
Sure.
find them and where might they be instead so people can look for them?
Sure. So if you own mutual funds, or whether in like um, any random, I don't want to use any names, but any big name like the big green company, for example, if you have an account there and there are mutual funds in that account or ETFs, there are expenses associated with those funds. They are not legally required to put those expenses on the statements, but they are required to distribute prospectus information to you at various times. And so they are providing the information to you. It might be buried in like 80 pages in tiny little font, but you're getting it somewhere, but it's easy enough to find out. And you can ask your advisor about them. And the follow-up question to that is there revenue sharing in this expense? Is there revenue sharing with your firm and with you, the advisor? I mean, let's be clear, advisors do their work to earn a living. I don't begrudge them earning a living as long as it's all transparent and that the fee structure that you are getting, you believe is the one that is in your best interest,
Right.
right? I happen to believe that a fee for assets being managed as the only source of revenue for our firm is what I believe in. It's what I believe to be best for my clients. That's the structure that I wanted to have for my practice.
Mhm.
But there are other advisors that feel otherwise, and there are other clients that are fine with that, right? They like their advisor, everything's fine. So they don't want to rock the boat. Cool. As long as you know and understand, then you can make an informed decision.
Is it safe to say that I almost feel like what you're saying is when you say I believe that it should be this way, it's almost like you're saying, well, I want to take the money that I'm earning, that I'm working for, not just like random fees slapped on. Is that a fair way to assess it, or am I being a little harsh? Or are you going to plead the fifth?
No, I think it's fair. I
Okay.
think it's fair. I mean, look, at the end of the day, um, if you are simply passively earning that income coming in and not doing anything for the money, and the client doesn't know that it's coming in, the client doesn't know to have expectations.
Right.
What I like about my practice now is that we are completely transparent about the fees that we charge. In fact, when our clients log into our portal to see their accounts, what they pay in fees is right on the first page. As soon as they log in, they see their performance and they see their fees. So
Yeah.
that when I then communicate with them, hey, it's time to update your plan. We haven't looked at this in a while. We need to talk. They understand that I'm simply trying to earn the fee that they're paying,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Whereas just an advisor that is collecting these fees, not proactively reaching out to the clients, accepting the fact that that one attempt to reach out to the client, two attempts to reach out to the client per year is not yielding a return call. Oh, well, I'm getting my fees. I just didn't sit well with me. And it's part of what drove me to make a change.
Yeah. Yeah, parallel in my world. I'm always drawing parallels in my world, but
Of
that's how my
course.
brain operates. It's
Yeah.
almost like, tell me if you feel otherwise, but the testing we were referencing earlier,
Mhm.
genetic testing, for example, I don't upcharge for those tests. They're already expensive enough as they are, but many practitioners do. And a lot of times, like when you talk to the testing companies, they will encourage the practitioner to upcharge for the test. Like, because, you can make more money that way. I just charge for my time to interpret and then the sessions, but I'd rather not upcharge for the test itself. But, like you said, I can't knock a practitioner that does upcharge for the test as long as they're upfront with the person that, I don't know. It's hard to be, I guess it's hard to be upfront, but with that, maybe it's hard, maybe it's not. But a lot of practitioners do upcharge for the test, and I feel like it should be spoken to the client. Like, yeah, you could get it cheaper here, but from me, you're
I,
gonna get it for this much.
I think at the end of the day, when it comes to fees and recognizing that for those of our audience that are probably out on their walk, they're probably coming back to their finish line pretty soon.
They're panting.
So
They're like, all right, enough.
enough, right? When it comes to fees, it's a pretty sensitive topic. When it comes to paying for things, it's a pretty sensitive topic, right? How frequently do you hear from clients if you're talking about different things? Hey, do you know if insurance covers that? Is that
Oh,
covered by
yeah.
insurance? All the time, right? Because somehow they've sort of written off the idea that they're paying their premiums for the health insurance. And so if insurance covers it, they'll do it. But if insurance doesn't cover it, they won't do it. Fees are a tricky thing. And I think at the end of the day, we as professionals never want to be in a position of being embarrassed by the fees that we earn. We
Right,
are we are entitled to earn a living for the
right,
work that we do.
right.
But I just think we want to make sure that we're never embarrassed by if it were to wind up all over the internet that Lindsey Day was charging 50% more for a particular test, would that be embarrassing to you?
Yeah.
And if so, then you probably don't want to do it. If something wound up on the internet that Pete Ivanyi was charging this, would that be embarrassing, right? And so,
That's a good filter. That's a good filter. I like that.
right.
I actually
So
did about a year ago, maybe more than that, about a year ago to offer a money back guarantee for my transformation clients, which I've never heard of a nutritionist doing before. But basically, if the person after 3 months is not satisfied with the results they've gotten, I will give them their money back that they've paid me. No questions asked, just,
they just better darn well be doing the work, right?
Oh, yes. Thank you for saying that. So they do have to show up to session. So
Yeah.
they can't like not show up, and then they do have to be, following through.
The
But I
guidelines.
have a way to track it. But it's not
Yeah.
like they need to be perfect. I'm not saying, oh, you have to be perfect on your diet. No, you just have to show
Mm,
up to your sessions. And
yep.
we agree on two things that they're going to do each week, and you have to have done at least 90% of them. And I track these things. I track these metrics. So yeah, they have to do their part. But I've never had anyone that hasn't been happy with their results if they do what they're asked to do. So that's what I do. I haven't had anyone ask for their money back yet. But anyway, so yeah, it's tricky. But I do. I mean, I think the financial world, what you're doing is very different than what I'm doing. But I think at the core, what we're both doing is we are both earning our money. Like you are giving your clients your value and then some. Like yes, they're paying you, but they are getting more than that in value from what you're offering. And my
I
goal
like to think so.
yeah, and my goal is to do the same for people. And if it happens, I do want to earn my money. I want people to say, "Oh, that was worth every penny." And I think we both align on that. Like we do pride ourselves on giving value to our clients. But
So speaking of value,
Mhm.
as we wrap up here, we haven't talked about this, so don't get mad at me.
Okay.
I'm going to ask our listeners to either DM you or pop into the comments what they would like to hear from us. We know that people are listening. We know that people are messaging us,
Mhm.
and all of the positive feedback is appreciated. But to the extent that there's anyone that wants to hear about anything nutrition or fitness related or finance related, let us know.
Yeah, I would
We've
never
got some
accept
top
that.
right?
Yeah,
We
that's
have some topics that we need to finish up, but we can also answer questions and have conversations about things that maybe the topics that our clients are bringing to us, but our listeners have some questions. Let's talk about them.
I love that. Yes. I think that's a great stopping point, and we will be back at it. It is what month are we in? March?
We're in March, so we'll be back next month.
So yes, we'll be back in April to continue this conversation and maybe to begin a new one that gets thrown our way from your
Love
topic.
it.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.